and do that same thing. Okay, hi everyone. Today we're going to demo the Marshall SV20, the Studio Vintage 20, and I'm not going to play any pedals like I normally do in my videos. I'm just going to go through and try to set up a really good clean tone and show you how I go about doing that on this amp. This amp's a little bit different than a lot of amps that we use. It doesn't have a master volume. You have 4 inputs over here. There's lots of information on the internet, so I'm probably preaching to the choir, but for those that don't know, I'm going to kind of go through and show you what I do to get the tone that I'm looking for, a nice clean tone. One thing about these amps is they can be really harsh. That's the thing about these old Plexi amps, especially if you're playing through the bright channel, which is, they call it the high treble channel. I call it the bright channel. They call what I call the dark channel the normal channel. Personally, I like to always plug into the high side of the dark channel and I can get all my tones that way. My personal experience, that's the way I did it. Also, when I was in Relic and Trixie using the big one, the 100 watt, 1969, it was the same thing, although it's even harsher on this one. For some reason, the 20 watts, or maybe it has to do with, you know, the old ones being hand wired and all of them a little different, and this one, you know, being a printed circuit board. But it's, unless you tame it down, it could be really harsh. That might be what you're looking for if you're going for a really, like say, an Eddie Van Halen type of tone. It'll get you there for sure. You're still going to probably want to use a pedal, but you're going to have to turn it all the way up and have some really hot pickups if you're going to try to get that tone. And most likely you're going to want to put that speaker cabinet in another room because it is loud even at 20 watts. Very reactive amps, and depending on how you play, what you want to do, and how you set it up will make you either happy or upset with the thing. But this thing is really as good as it gets. If you want to sound like you're playing in an album and playing along to an album, this is what you want. But it takes a little know-how to get to use it and understand how to get those tones and be willing to use pedals to do certain things and turn the volume down. Now, if you use pedals, you can get away with going into the 5 watt mode and you just set yourself a good clean tone and then use the pedal. If you have a good pedal, it kind of becomes your amp. Like if you're using a train wreck or a BE overdrive, the BE overdrive set up to sound like Eddie Van Halen, the brown tone. So you can just use the 5 watt, get a good clean tone at a relatively low volume, even on 5 watts, and then turn the gain up on the pedal, turn the drive up on the pedal, turn the level up on the pedal, and it'll get loud enough to record and it'll give you that tone that you're looking for. It also will give you the feel under your fingers of a tube amp that you just don't get with a solid state amp. Okay, enough yapping, let's talk about what's going on here. So we're going to start, whenever I take any amp and I'm trying to figure out what to do, I like to roll everything right at noon and then see what we have to work with. But I'm going to start by explaining what are these 4 inputs and what do they do. Okay, so you can think of it as you don't have a master volume, and how the gain stages work, it depends on how much volume you turn up on the dark channel or the bright channel. As you start going up, it'll stay clean to about 4.5 or 5. It'll start to break up just a little before 6 and more so, and it starts getting really loud. So you get amp 2 breakup and speaker breakup past 6. And it's a totally different breakup between the dark and the bright channel. So we're playing right now, if you think of this, we're just on this channel, which I'm plugged into the highest gain of the dark channel. And then you have a pad. It basically is a lower, it gives you a pad, a dB loss on the lower input. So I have this jumper cable sticking out because I'm going to jumper this thing over here in a second. But for right now, I'm playing on the high input of this channel, the dark channel. And this is wide open, which is this channel here. This is my control. So I'm going to leave this off and I'm going to turn everything on the amp straight up. Okay, this section is your EQ section, which is just the same as it is in your car or anything else, bass, middle and treble, bass, middle and treble. And then you have your presence, which is basically what it says. It pushes you out in front of the mix. It has a tendency to add in a lot of treble and mid-range, and it can also, it'll cut through in a mix. So if you're feeling a little flubby and you don't feel like you're being heard enough, if you're playing behind a loud drummer or something, you can turn the presence up, but just be warned, don't make any mistakes. Because if you just basically knock your guitar, they're going to hear it. It really is a presence, and it's very sensitive on this amp. So I can tell you right now that that's probably going to be too high for what we're doing, but I just want to show everything straight up. I'm playing with both pickups. I have both volumes set on this is a PRS S1, which is their version of a Les Paul. Absolutely awesome guitar. I've had quite a few Les Pauls over my career. And I think this one, it'll stand up right alongside any of them, and probably is a little bit better than most of them. So I'm going to play right in the center position with both pickups. I have the tone down about halfway, and I have the volumes at about 8, 8.5, not all the way up. The only time I ever play with the volume all the way up is when I'm soloing and I want maximum sustain. And I'm usually using some sort of an overdrive pedal, usually a tube screamer or something. Other than that, if you back it down just a little bit, it takes a little bit of that harshness out and it rounds the edges, which I'm going to try to show you what to do here on this amp. So here we go. This is everything straight up. Okay, that's pretty nice. It's a little bit too woofy, a little bit too dark, a little bit too much bass, so you can start messing with this EQ. I'm going to back the presence down. I'm going to back, for this particular setting, I'm going to back the bass down to about 3. I'm going to push the mids and push the treble up a little bit, and let's see what we have here. I might also, on my guitar tones, bring out the treble a little bit more, move it a quarter click or so. Okay, that's a really good place to start. You can mess with the volume, but I'm just going to leave it for this demo. I'm going to leave everything halfway on the volume. Now, what happens if we mix in the bright channel? Let's do that. And we're going to start by putting it into the padded section, a little bit less input gain, down here on the bottom one. And this isn't on now, so we have to start rolling some of this in. Let me show you. About there, I think. Okay, that's pretty nice. Let's see what happens if I go into the higher side. You can hear the amp start hissing. Let me tell you something, you better be good to play like that. It's going to cut through the mix, it sounds great, but you better not make any mistakes because you're going to hear every little thing. So if I'm playing in the recording studio and I'm really trying to get the best possible sound, I'd probably set it just like that. And because I have the ability I do it all the time on these videos. I make a flub, I just keep going because I know I'm going to go back and cut it. But if I'm playing live in front of 5,000 people, I'm not going to set it like that. I'm just not that good. So you want to give yourself a little bit of room, and how you play on stage and in front of people, well, there's a whole story behind that which I'll get into later, but it has to do with how comfortable you are with your sound and your tone and how it's making you feel, how it's moving you. So that tone sounds really good, but you're going to know, you're going to feel it under your fingers. You're going to be constantly worried about the slightest little mistake being amplified. So I wouldn't play like that in a live situation, me personally. So what I would do to this is I'd back off the presence. I'd turn down the volume of this side. So listen, if you can listen closely. Hear it go right about there. You'll hear it soften and round. Hear the harshness. Hear that? Right there. It just rounded it. Now that sounds like a really subtle difference, but when you're playing, and I probably back this down just a little bit too, because I got more volume coming in now. Now see, I still have a nice round, bright tone that's projecting out, and there's plenty of treble and plenty of mid-range in there and a lot of bass. Maybe I'd back off my tone another quarter of a turn on both of these. That, to me, is a pretty darn good clean tone. So I guess we'll cut it for there for this part of the video.
Energy on stage.
Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about what we're actually doing here. Especially when you start getting into an amp of this caliber and of this power, especially when you're playing with a 100-watt version of this. What you're really doing is you're riding the energy. You're playing with lightning, literally. And we are electrical beings. So you know it. When you're young and you're going out and dating, you're going to the bars, you're going to a dance at school or whatever, you know it. If there's a girl looking at you, or you're a girl and there's a guy looking at you, you feel it. It's like having eyes in the back of your head. You know it. There's a gnosis that's going on there. That is energy signature. And so if you could imagine, I'd be backstage warming up with my little baby Marshall, practicing, and no matter how many shows that I played over the years, there'd always be the butterflies as the club was loading up, or the concert arena, whatever it was. So I'd be back there warming up, and I'd be going down the scales, and I'd make a mistake. We all do that all the time. But then all of a sudden you get ready to come on, the crowd's there, and you plug in and you hear that you go to another place, and who you thought was you is no longer you, and that other higher spirit, whatever you want to call it, takes over, and there's a reaction that's happening between you and the crowd. It's a give and a take, and if you can imagine, thousands of people are putting their energy and their focus on you as a guitar player, on you as a drummer, the singer, the bass player, whatever you might be doing in the band. And anybody that's out there that's played in front of people will know and have experienced something like this. And if you're aspiring to do that, it's an awesome thing, let me tell you. The music industry itself ain't so awesome. But that energy exchange, and it's what it's all about. And you watch somebody like Eddie Van Halen or Gary Moore or Stevie Ray Vaughan, and they crank up their Marshalls or their Fenders, and they're just standing up there, pouring their heart and their soul out on stage, and the crowd's giving it back, and that whole experience. And what happens is you start to, I never knew what my Marshalls were going to do. So really, the Marshalls are the instrument. I mean, we are programming the instrument with our fingers and our knowledge of learning. You got to know your chops, learn your scales, and do all the stuff that you do. Practice all the time with your drummer and your bass player and your band, and all the things that we do to be in the band. But once the lights go down, the spotlight goes on, and the energy goes flowing, magic happens. Magic happens. And it's awesome. And I haven't played in years, but I missed that part of it. I don't miss the industry at all. But I missed that part of it, and I would encourage you to if you want to get good and really learn how to play and play loud, then my old guitar player Tom Landry, he played for Eddie Money and a lot of different bands over the years. Great guitar player, great guy. And he used to say, first, play it for me slow. How can you play it fast if you can't play it slow? So I would encourage you to actually chuck this whole thing for a year. Don't use your amp. Don't use your electric guitar. Buy acoustic guitar. You should already have one. If you don't have one, get one. This is where your tone comes from, right here, and from your heart and your soul. And so learn to use these. Like in the Karate Kid, first use this. Show me wax on, wax off. Get that acoustic guitar and learn how to get the tones out of the amp without using an amp. Get them out of the guitar. Tune it down a half step. I got a video about 432. Tune it down. Watch what happens, especially on an acoustic guitar. All the overtones in the wood start coming out. There's a whole other story behind all that. Watch the video and you'll see it. But once you get to that type of level and you can do that, spend a whole year doing that, maybe even 2 years. And I mean every day, nothing but the acoustic guitar. Try to play the hardest thing you can think of playing. All kinds of scales that you think are impossible, just keep playing them over and over and over until you want to know how Gary Moore got that good? That's exactly how he did it. I started off like most of everybody. I wanted to be, like Eddie Van Halen and then the rest of the guys, and I kept getting in this amp and that amp, and I always had to have a Marshall, and I played a lot of Gibsons back then, and I've had them all. And I never could really totally get that tone. You want to know why? Because I never actually took the time to just sit down and learn how to really, really play on the acoustic guitar and exercise my fingers till I could execute. First, play it slow before you can play it fast. So that's the best advice I can give you for then. And then you can see if like right now I have this set at a totally clean tone, but how I go about and execute how I'm going to play, I can pull that sustain and somewhat of a distortion that's just coming from the strings and coming from the amp itself with no pedals involved at all. Like if I was going to go. Okay, did that sound exactly like what it sounded like at Led Zeppelin? No. But you can hear that I was getting that out of how I was bending the strings and my pick attack and everything else, and that comes from having strong fingers and knowing how to do that. So if I wanted to turn that, now if I give myself a distorted tone and do that same thing.